Hi all, this is the characteristics of life notes that you're going to watch here, and then you're gonna go ahead and do the follow-up assignment that goes along with that. This is if we don't have time in class, or I've just assigned it as homework to watch and go ahead and do the homework practice. You will have a quiz on this material relatively soon, so make sure you keep up with the calendar and make sure you've retained everything. So this notes, like I said, is about the characteristics of life, what makes something living. We have a little picture here of a frog, and he is trying to get the mosquito there to get his chemical energy. Chemical energy is essentially what is in the food that all living things eat. So carbohydrates, proteins, and fats are macromolecules, or just molecules that all living things must be made of or have in order to survive and repopulate. He's also taking in some oxygen as well, but I don't think that's in the picture. And he's giving off heat and using ATP as energy. So that's called metabolism. So let's go ahead and break this down a little bit more. So here are some pictures of what we consider life. Biology is the study of life, and that's why you're kind of in our class here. And we use the scientific method to study living things. So how can we describe living things? Living things can be in the form of, sea creatures like shrimp. Cuttlefish is also a form of living thing. Even bacteria is considered living. Plants, etc. All those things are considered living. So what makes something alive? Living things in our class are defined as having these characteristics. Sometimes people say 5, sometimes people say 6 or 7 characteristics, but we can say 7 for our class to clarify. Growth and development, so they need to be able to grow and develop and mature. They need to be able to be organized into cells. So the smallest living thing is made of one cell. So there are unicellular. Uni prefix means one. So we have unicellular organisms on this planet that are considered living, and we also have multicellular organisms that are considered living as well. We have the ability to reproduce, and that's based on a universal genetic code we call DNA and RNA. So if you recall from your previous experience in science, DNA and RNA have the nitrogenous bases, A's, T's, G's, and C's. RNA doesn't have T's though, it has U's. So we'll learn about that a little bit later in our biological year here. They need to be able to respond to a stimulus or their environment, because if they do not, then they don't have the capacity to make sure they survive. Homeostasis is a very big one. Homeostasis is we're going to hone in on a little bit more than the others. We'll talk more about that when I get to that slide. And the ability to evolve over many generations. So evolution does not happen in one individual's lifetime. It happens over many generations, and evolution happens to a population of individuals. We'll talk about that too. And they need to have the ability to metabolize, or to use energy to do work. So those are your 7. Growth and development, like I said, the ability to divide cells and make more cells, we call growth. And development means to mature or go through life stages. So the cells either specialize or they differentiate into different roles. So for example, a tadpole, tadpoles, they go ahead and mature into frogs, right? And that takes time and multiple stages. Same for humans. We all start as embryos, and we develop over time into our many stages. You guys are probably aware of what those are. Think newborn, think toddler, think preteen, teen, adult, etc. Okay, at the bottom here are pictures of all different types of cells that comes from one cell. So when you are growing and developing, right, you are forming from stem cells, and stem cells can actually form into many different jobs or different roles. We call that differentiation. So those roles of different cells, as you see on the screen, muscle cells, bone cells, blood cells. If you want to learn more about those types of cells, you take my anatomy class. Number 2, organization and cells. So most living things are made of cells that contain DNA. Unicellular organisms are one cell. Prefix there is uni, like a unicycle is one wheel on a bicycle. Okay. And then multicellular organisms made of many cells. Okay. So left side here we have an E. coli bacteria. That is one cell large. That's considered unicellular. On the right side, we have human cheek cells. You're going to be able to see those under the microscope this year. Those are going to be multicellular organisms that have many different types of cells. Okay. So bacteria, uni, human tissue is going to be considered multicellular because we have lots of different types of tissue in the body. Cells are organized in levels. So cells work together to form increasing levels of complexity. So the smallest unit of life is the first of our flow chart here, cells. So think of a test question I could ask you, right? What is the smallest unit of life? Is that the smallest, let's say, item on the planet? No, right? Think atom, think smaller than that. But this is biology, so the study of life. So the smallest unit of life is cells. Many cells that perform a common function are called tissues. Tissues together that form a common function, and together are organs. Organs that work together are considered organ systems, and a collection of organ systems we call an organism. And it can go on from there into the ecological standpoint of, okay, many organisms together as a population, etc. But right now we're only looking at this set of level of organization, okay? So as you can see on the screen there, we have cells to tissues, tissues to organs. Many organs make an organ system. Many organ systems make an individual or an organism, depending on what you look at. Those individuals make a population. So you and me are in our classroom. We are considered a population. It would be considered an ecosystem if we have lots of different populations of different animals and plants and water and etc. So considering non-living things as well, we call ecosystems. And many ecosystems together is considered the biosphere, which we are on planet Earth. Living things reproduce sexually or asexually. So sexual reproduction involves two living things that make a new living thing by combining cells. You might have learned about that in health class. We call that fertilization, right? Sperm and egg. Asexual reproduction is when the organism clones itself. So typically smaller organisms do asexual reproduction. There's not a lot of genetic variation there because they're not recombining with anybody new. They are just splitting off from themselves. So key concept here is that hereditary or something that is passed on is via DNA, the A's, T's, G's, and C's of our double helix, that all living things have genetic code. Here's some examples of living things. And so what I would challenge you to do is take a look at each one of these pictures and tell me which of the 7 characteristics of life you see in the picture. The ones that might trick you up might be the ones that are plant-based. So you can see the flower at the bottom there. It looks like it's a windy day, spreading all of its pollen in all of its parts. That's how it travels and spreads its seed. That's the only way that plants can spread the seed, other than maybe animals or insects rubbing up on the plant, getting the pollen, and then pollinizing another or fertilizing another plant. We also have a seahorse here. You can see all of the little baby seahorse, and I think that's a dad seahorse. Seahorses are strange. The dad is the one that carries all the babies. All right. Another example of reproduction that is not very common. It's not going to be sexual. Okay, so sea stars, you just break a piece off of them, or you can see a piece is breaking off, and that's how they reproduce. Bacterias, they reproduce asexually, etc. Response to environment is another characteristic of life. Living things detect stimuli from their environment and then they respond to the environment. So the stimulus is the signal from the environment, and then the response is the response to that. Okay? So a plant moves towards a light source. The light source is considered the stimulus. The response is the plant moving. And you can see it in the image. The plant moves, and in the GIF, the plants are moving towards the light source. Okay? Homeostasis, like I said, was a big one. So what is that homeostasis? It's not homostasis, it's homeostasis. Make sure you say it before you say it out loud, okay? Homeostasis. What that means is the organism is maintaining internal conditions while they're responding to changes outside the body. So think inside temperature, blood pressure, glucose levels, anything that's inside the body that, like, if you went to the doctor, they would be measuring, okay? That is the body's way of regulating everything. So conditions outside a living thing may change dramatically, but the conditions inside a living thing need to be kept constant, or else it's going to be out of whack. We call this the Goldilocks characteristic. If it's not perfect or just right, your body's going to be out of whack. So for example, keeping cool via sweating. So you sweat in response to your body being warm inside, okay? Cells burn fuel to create heat. So when you're too cold, what happens, all right? So that's an example of some examples of homeostasis. Evolution is over time, traits change in a population. So you have a persistence of adaptations versus natural selection. We're going to talk about that later in the year. So, for example, there are different size necks in giraffes, and depending on the environment, right, if there is the food source higher up in the trees, the short neck giraffes will not be able to reach, and so they will not be able to eat, therefore they die. And so the giraffes that can reach, the longer neck giraffes, are able to repopulate and make more long neck giraffes. Okay, so this does not happen to anybody in their lifetime. This is a population level change. Populations change evolutionarily, not individuals. Metabolism is when living things obtain and use energy to survive. They can capture or collect resources to survive, like hunt, or they can break down and digest these resources into usable forms. So it could be for example, this shark who's eating, but it also could be plants. Plants have to eat too. So we'll talk more about that later. And that's it.